It's now live.
All right. Lovely. In that case, welcome everybody to the Cabinet meeting on the shortest day of 2021. And welcome to everyone who's joining us virtually this evening. Please note the meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel. And before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny manager to explain how proceedings tonight will work.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll just start with a quick roll call of the officers joining us on Zoom this evening. If you can let us know whether you can be heard and whether we can hear you. So we'll start with Ian Cooper.
Yes, I'm here and can hear you.
Thank you. Ruben Iavu.
Present, and I can hear you.
Thank you. Louise Randall.
Present, and I can hear you.
Oh, I can slightly hear you there, Louise. You're quite quiet though.
Sorry, is that a bit better?
Yep, that's perfect. Yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Nigel Smith.
Yes, present.
Thank you, Nigel. Anne Banner.
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you. Jeanette Thompson.
Yes, I can hear you. Good evening.
Thank you. And Ian Fullstone.
Yes, good evening, and I can hear you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other officers in attendance who I haven't called out?
Yes, I'm present. Jo Duffy.
Thank you, Jo. That's great. Thank you. That's the roll call finished. So I'll just go through the procedure. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and will be made, and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. Voting, when requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. Members and officers are required to wear masks when standing or moving around the room or the building. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? No, I'll hand back to the chair then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, before we get into the main business of this evening, I think pretty much everyone will have noticed that there's a vacant place next to me. 2 weeks ago today, we lost Councillor Paul Clark, and I think it's safe to say that it was a sudden sharp shock to all of us, and that every member of this council and the majority of the community, and certainly Hitchin, if not North Herts, will miss Paul's passion and presence and diligence going forward. I think we've all said words in many places over the last 2 weeks, and we've had a lot of time to reflect. So I don't wish to say anything further at this time. However, I think as the first cabinet meeting following Paul's passing, it's appropriate that we have a 1 minute silence to reflect and to remember Paul Clark. So colleagues, if you'd like to join me for that. Thank you very much. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I have apologies from Councillor Gary Grindle and Councillor Sam Collins, and also from Councillor Ruth Brown, who has now taken up the role as deputy leader of this council and the planning portfolio holder. We don't have any apologies from any other executive members because everybody's here. So next item is minutes of the cabinet meeting on the 21st of September 2021. I'd like to propose that we take these as read and approve them as a true record of the minutes of that meeting. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Albert. Lovely. And any comments, any discussion, debate on that? No. So can we move to the vote, please, James?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you very much, everyone. Okay, notification of any other business. There is none. Chair's announcements. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being audio recorded as well as filmed. The audio recording will be available on the North Herts Council website and the film recording via the North Herts Council YouTube channel. Members are reminded that this council has declared a climate emergency. This is a serious decision and means that, as this is an emergency, all of us, members and officers, have that in mind as we carry out our various roles and tasks for the benefit of our district. More details are included on the agenda front sheet, and members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcements on the agenda. Item number 6, public participation. There is none this evening. So moving on to item number 7, items referred from other committees. We've got a couple of referrals from Finance, Audit and Risk and Overview and Scrutiny. I believe Ian Cooper will be taking us through these. So if I can pass over to Mr. Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. Most of the referrals are also subject to separate items on the agenda, but just to clarify that FAR have no specific comments on any of them. They obviously recommend them onto you, but didn't make any comments onto you as a committee. The one that's on there that is not also on the agenda as a separate item is the referral from both Overview and Scrutiny and FAR. The report went to both of them in relation to the integrated performance management report. So I'll take you through that report now in brief detail. The proposal here is to change the way that we deal with performance indicators, projects and risks to make them all more aligned to each other and also to the council plan. In the report, section 7 details the processes and documents that are presented both to FAR and to Open Scrutiny as it is. And then section 8 makes some recommendations around how we change that to put it into one report and hopefully make it all more aligned. Tonight, you are asked to approve this change, albeit that recommendation 2.2 is that there are some minor changes to the Constitution, and therefore the recommendations of that particular recommendation is forwarded onto Council for approval in January. As I said, both FAR and Open Scrutiny were supportive of the recommendations in the report. I'm happy to take any questions on the detail of it. But apart from that, I think that's where we have a summary of where we are with that report.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I have Councillor Albert.
Cheers. Thanks, Chair. And really, obviously, to support and obviously happy to, to move this, recommendation. I mean, this piece of work sort of started from seminars that I think you, Chair, and I attended, and obviously we had meetings then with Ian and Rachel in relation to this, and I think this actually does represent an advance, as Ian says, in what we do and how we monitor the performance, and also I think particularly here is in actually making sure that there is a role for cabinet in actually as part of this process, and it's not just obviously left with referrals, maybe for overview and scrutiny. But obviously the council does actually take an active view about it, and obviously it's also then relates and is very much integrated with the council plan, the council delivery plan, and so on. So I think this is a step forward. We obviously need to see, I'm sure we'll need to see how it works in practice and see whether any further amendments or tweaks are needed. But I think what I think was particularly interesting, cross-party at both of the meetings, that there was widespread support for these proposals and said they were sort of long overdue. So obviously thanks to Ian and team for coming up with the paper, which obviously I know colleagues here will have seen at PLB meeting, and very happy that we're taking this forward, and happy to recommend that we support it.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder for the, yep, Councillor Billing? Okay, and does anybody wish to speak or discuss the recommendations on this? No. Okay, in that case, the recommendations are that the proposals set out in this report be approved, which relate to the relation and monitoring of an integrated council delivery plan, and the Cabinet recommend to Council to approve the changes to the Constitution as detailed at section 9. Can we move to the vote on that, please, James?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Okay, item number 8 is moving us into the section of tonight's agenda, which I shall call the Ian Albert Show, which will be followed by the Ian Mantle Show later. Ian Albert, could you please present your draft budget?
For what I think makes sense, before with your agreement, we've had the local government settlement, which is an addendum paper in front of you as well this evening. Probably worthwhile just actually getting whilst recognising, I think our short-term position is slightly better than we're expecting, but at the medium to longer term is still very uncertain. Although it does now look like we'll get a new funding formula during next year, presumably for 23-24 onwards. But perhaps if I just get Ian Cooper to just talk you through some of the, briefly through the detail from the funding settlement, and then I'll move the rest of the report, Chair. So, Ian.
Thank you, Councillor Albert. Thank you, Chair. So if I'm referring to the addendum report, as Councillor Albert mentioned, and the table in that report details the main funding streams for the council and what's come out as a result of the local government settlement announcement at the end of last week. In terms of the grants that are on that table, the lower tier services grant, we received that last year, but assumed it had been a one-off, but we have got it again. So that is an improvement on the position we were forecasting. We assumed in the MTFS that, in line with what the government had announced, we would receive funding to recompense us for the additional costs coming out from the National Insurance / Social Care levy. And that is predominantly what that grant is doing. The direct costs in terms of our staff, we estimate to be about £100,000. But proposing here that the remainder is set aside into essential contingency, because there will be a knock-on impact from other staff who are working for our contractors, and in certain circumstances you may require to pass on some of those increases, and therefore that funding will help with that. Newcomers bonus, we had made a prudent assumption that we just get the legacy year, but they have honoured it for another year, the year ending in September 2021. So therefore the amount we've got is quite a bit higher than what we forecast. Everything else on that table is as expected, to give or take a few £1,000 here or there, as expected, and probably symptomatic of when the discussion about this first took place. There is no additional COVID-19 funding in next year, and therefore any additional cost of COVID-19 we'll have to fund ourselves. And that, combined with the impact of inflation, which has been highlighted in the main report, is why I'm just asking you, although we've got more funding next year, asking you as a cabinet just to be a bit prudent around not adding anything in unless it really is essential and is clearly aligned to the council objectives as set in the council plan. Looking at the medium to longer term, as Councillor mentioned, it is looking like there'll be a new formula discussed and subject to consultation the early part of next year, which should mean that it's implemented in time for 23-24. The good news is that there has been made clear that there will be some transitional protection in there. So even adopting our prudent assumption that there could still be a change to the formula equivalent to the dreaded negative RSG that has been threatened for quite some time, the transitional protection will help that kind of effect come in over a longer period and may therefore reduce the impact of that and therefore allow savings to be delivered over a long period. Obviously, we can still hope that that level of funding cut will not be applied to us. But for now, I think there's got to be the safe assumption we have to make and then hope for something better. And that's where I'll end and hand back to Councillor Albert.
Thanks, Ian. And obviously colleagues have, any questions like that, we can certainly pick them up at the end. I mean, I think it's worthwhile saying, and clearly that 8.1 to 8.6 have been superseded now, really, obviously by Ian's report. 8.7 and 8.8 cover pay and price inflation. I'm sure colleagues here will be supportive of the trade unions and their and I think the need for actually giving staff a decent pay increase. Of course, obviously the problem is that the councils don't get funding for that, and we've also got now significantly higher inflation now up to 5%. And all of these impact upon our ability to deliver savings and efficiencies in the future. And of course, it does mean, and I'm sure obviously Councillor Allen, for example, will be well aware, obviously the cost, the additional cost to our waste contract, for example, as part of that. I think we could see in the budget proposals that in front of you and will be well familiar, I think, to colleagues here. They've seen them on a number of times and various versions of them on a number of occasions, and the feedback on there is in 8.15 to 8.18. There were no formal comments from finance about the proposals. The proposal around garden waste, which I'll touch on in a moment, was welcomed at the finance committee about that sort of small increase, 80p a year increase in the garden waste charge, a below inflation increase. I know one councillor said they did have some comments on the budget, but they were going to reserve them for another forum. I'm not sure which forum that is, but I think you could probably guess. But there were no specific comments from the finance committee about the budget papers, as said earlier. And indeed, obviously, they voted to support the paper and support it being recommended here. You'll be aware, obviously, that we obviously did that further work, which obviously is set out in 8.19, 8.20, and to actually help to achieve our sort of savings target. And I think thanks to obviously executive members and service directors and colleagues, I think for all of the work that there's been done on the budget to get to us to the point that we've got here. So therefore, I'll be proposing that we agree these proposals before us to be taken forward to the final draft budget that will come back to us in January. There was a question at the finance committee that was asked about a council tax freeze and what it would cost the the council. Now, I think we all know how difficult at the moment it is for many people faced with their tax on their living standards, from fuel increases, from food pricing increases. We'll be proposing, when it comes to the budget, that our council tax should increase this year by approximately 10p a week. And the problem, and I think the question that was asked at the Finance Committee was, well, what would be the impact upon the council of us freezing council tax? And I think it's worthwhile stating here for the record that would cost the council £250,000 a year on an ongoing a basis, and that is something that while our funding has slightly improved this year, that is something that simply that this council could not afford. And whilst we are reluctant to, and always are reluctant to, increase council tax, we believe that what we're doing and the value for money in the services that we're providing, and also I think the work that's gone here, when you look at the savings that we've made, but more importantly, look at the investments that we're making, which is important about investing in key services for our residents around food standards, environmental health and conservation and so on. We think those investments are actually something that we hope that I think not only I think this council will welcome, but more importantly that our residents that will welcome. And I think it's something that we actually are seeking to improve the services that we're offered. And why are we doing this? Because actually the previous administration, and we're still having to pick up the mess from the previous administration, we're having to actually put in place now to make sure that our staff are able to cope with the work that is placed upon them, and actually that make sure that our residents get the services that they deserve. And that's why those key investments, we think, and we would recommend to you, and are set out in the tables. Now we are in a slightly better position, as Ian had said, and clearly where if there were proposals in front of us for small one-off investments in 22-23, there is some leeway for that. But clearly, when we know what we can still see down the track, we need to be very prudent, and that's obviously what we've said in that addendum report. We need to be very prudent about any further investments, and it would need to be looking very much on a value for money basis, and where we consider it to be a priority alongside the council plan. So colleagues, I'm happy to kind of commend this paper to you now. You'll get to see it again. We'll clearly be coming to the full council meeting in February with it, and I'd obviously like to recommend those recommendations in the paper in agenda item 8 and 2.1 to 2.3, and clearly obviously we'll say we will be coming back with the final draft budget in January. I'll move those recommendations, Chair.
Thank you very much, Ian. And also thank you to colleagues both in the Cabinet and officers as well for engaging in what I think this year was a particularly difficult process for the reasons that Ian has outlined. And I am proud that Ian has found a way that where we are needing to increase taxes, we are doing so in a way which is fair. And when we spend our money, we make sure that those investments and the things we spend our money on are carefully chosen and are wise. Councillor Billing.
Thank you, Chair. I have a complete support for the process that's been gone through, of course, and for the work of the officers and Ian that's been put into putting together this budget at the most difficult of times. But I do also have a small question born of anxiety, having been as diligent as I possibly can over a small area in my own area of interest, and given the complication of the fact that, of course, the County Council is putting together its budgets at exactly the same time that we are, that I have not completed my task yet of securing the funding that we need from County to adequately continue into 2023-4 with our massively valuable Healthy Hub scheme, which at a time of pandemic and beyond just offers synergies to the community that are hard to measure in terms of their effectiveness. That means I am still working, I'm still negotiating, I'm still discussing with the county council ways in which we can improve, hopefully, their offer for 2023-4. And my process question, born of complete anxiety in this matter, is what is the deadline? At what point would Ian and anybody else called Ian turn around to me and say, go away, Judy Billing, you've left this far too late? Because I'm not leaving it far too late. I'm doing my best. Councillor Albert.
I will obviously stand to listen to Mr. Cooper, but I mean my view is ultimately is that we can consider amendments right up till the time where the budget meeting takes place, because clearly the obviously colleagues and obviously our Conservative colleagues can put forward budget amendments on the so ultimately the deadline is right into February, but clearly we would like to try and get to a settled place at an earlier stage than that, in time for the papers that come to to FAR, to Cabinet, and ultimately, in January. And so ideally, that's where we would want to be by mid January to have that information. But ultimately, that obviously that timescale does go on, and indeed can go on further than that. But Ian, I don't know whether you want to kind of comment, but certainly from that, we'd ideally like to know before the FAR meeting. But Ian, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. I agree. The earlier we know, the better. And certainly in terms of budget for this year, for moving into next year, 22-23, having a settled budget by the time you discuss this at Cabinet next time would be ideal. I believe, Councillor Billing, you mentioned this being a funding gap in 23-24 rather than 22-23. If I'm correct about that, there obviously is another bite at the cherry, so to speak, in terms of it could be considered as part of next year's budget process, going into 23-24 rather than 22-23. But I appreciate that you would be looking to get more certainty around the future funding of that and a decision on that earlier rather than later. So yeah, agree with what Councillor Albert has said, but there obviously is that situation for the 23-24 budget rather than 22-23.
Thank you, everybody. I'm doing my optimistic best.
Well done. Steve.
Thanks. I mean, I agree with what Ian has said in terms of having got to an acceptable position on the budget, and that's clearly an achievement in what are difficult circumstances when the government is unable to provide any sort of clarity as to what the long-term position is, and we need to avoid a situation of taking decisions in the short term on the basis of what might happen in the long term, whilst not prejudicing the council's longer term position. One hopes that this time they are actually going to deliver the longer term funding position, because they promised that before and failed to do it on several occasions. But I think the budget has delivers some real benefits, some of which Ian Albert has talked about, but there are also some work starting to be undertaken in terms of improving the council's environmental performance, things that will in the long term not only save it carbon emissions, but will save it money. And at a time when we're only likely to see energy costs increasing, using less of it can only benefit the council in the longer term. So I'm entirely happy with the budget we have set out. I mean, the question of council tax rises was mentioned, and I was interested to see today that the Police and Crime Commissioner announced his intention to increase his council tax by nearly 4.7%. We might want to draw that to some of our colleagues' attention, should they suggest that the council's 2% or slightly less than 2% increase is excessive. Clearly, it's something that does raise some issues in present circumstances, but is unavoidable. And we are doing a lot better than elsewhere on that basis, aren't we? So I'm entirely happy to support these proposals.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I do enjoy a veiled solar panel plug, so well done. I'm glad to see that you recovered from being up on the roof as well. Right then. So the 3 recommendations are set out on the report. They're slightly wordy, so I don't propose to read them out loud unless I'm bullied into it by officers. They're shaking their heads. Good, excellent. I'm assuming all my members can read. In that case, are we happy? I'm assuming Councillor Albert has proposed these. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jarvis. Steve was quicker, Judy. You can go third. We can have a thirder, it's fine. In which case then, James, can we please move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And part 2 of Ian Albert's tour de force is the quarterly update on risk management and annual review of risk management framework.
Chair, I think we can deal with this one fairly briefly. The only proposed change to the risk this quarter is to move the impact of antisocial behaviour on council facilities corporate risk to a service risk. This reflects the work that's been implemented to help manage the risk, and that enough time has now passed that the reduction in issues is not just down to the COVID-19 pandemic. And it's believed that the various actions that have been implemented are having an impact on behaviour. We're also asked to note the minor changes that have been made to the risk management framework as detailed in Appendix C. The risk reviews in relation to the general and leisure impact of COVID-19 were correct when they were written. As you appreciate, some of those risks are now more likely to transpire with the emergence of the new variant and the impact on people's activities and potentially the implementation of new restrictions, perhaps after Christmas and in the new year. And obviously, we'll be having we'll continue to have the discussions around leisure and later on at this meeting. But happy to move the recommendations there, Chair, in 2.1, and also ask Cabinet to note the annual review of the risk management framework as in 2.2.
Lovely, thank you very much. And does anybody wish to second the report? Yeah. Councillor Jarvis. Okay, any questions, discussion, debate? No. In which case we can move to the vote again. I'm not reading the recommendations out. Oh, there's a voice from the gods.
Sorry, Chair. Do you mind if I propose an alteration to recommendation 2.2 and ask you to approve the changes to the risk management framework rather than just note them? It's very safe for you that you approve them rather than just note them, if that's okay, Chair.
Oh,
yeah. Happy to change my recommendation to approve the annual review of the risk management framework.
Yep, and our colleagues happy to approve. We are all happy with that. In that case, can we move to the vote?
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Item 10 is the second quarter investment strategy, capital and treasury review 2021 to 2022, to be presented by Councillor Ian Albert.
Just scroll on to the right page 65 if you're scrolling through your agenda, to move the recommendations 2.1 and to 2.3 in the report. The table 3 in paragraph 8.5 shows the capital spend that we're removing from the capital programme in relation to the property development strategy and providing housing at market rents. This doesn't mean that we're stopping looking for new opportunities, but reflects that we have nothing definite in the pipeline at the moment, but who knows, watch this space. As detailed in 8.11, expected changes to the prudential code mean that it's best to be realistic about what's likely to happen. If an opportunity emerges, it would of course require approval by the council anyway, so that approval would be accompanied by a change to the investment strategy at the same time. Investment returns continue to be low, and we're still holding high balances of government money that will need to be paid back. We're generally at capacity with banks and building societies, so these excess balances are placed with the DMO. Sometimes that requires investing at negative interest rates. You'll be aware also that the Bank of England have recently increased the base rate to 0.25%. This may indeed have some positive effect on our investment returns, but obviously watch this space in terms of that. Obviously, I'm sure colleagues have read the paper, so I'm really happy at this stage to ask you to note the forecast expenditure of 3.045 million in 21-22 on the capital programme, as paragraph 8.3 refers. That Cabinet approves the adjustments to the capital programme for 21-22 onwards as a result of the revised timetable of schemes detailed in tables 2 and 3, decreasing the estimated spend in 2020 to 22-23 by 2.661 million, and that Cabinet notes the position of the availability of capital resources as detailed in table 4, paragraph 8.6, and the requirement to keep the capital programme under review for affordability. And finally, that the Cabinet recommends, that we recommend, and I recommended to Council that it notes the position of Treasury management activity as at the end of September 21, and obviously we'll come back to full Council. I move those recommendations 2.1 to 2.4, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Yeah, Councillor Billing. Okay. Any questions, queries, debate? No. Lovely. Can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 11, second quarter revenue monitoring 2021-2022, to be presented by some bloke called Albert.
Cheers, thanks, thanks, Chair. This is the second quarter revenue budget monitoring paper, which you'll find on page 97 for those of you scrolling through your agenda. The significant variances are detailed in table 3, the main ones being in relation to COVID-19 impacts, i.e. the housing benefit, overpayment, bad debt, leisure support and car parking income. The forecast reflects the continuing impact of COVID-19 to the end of the year with some gradual recovery. This seemed to be a reasonable assumption when the forecasts were being compiled following the end of the second quarter. Clearly now the impact of Omicron will depend on both whether new restrictions are introduced, the impact on people's behaviour and the impact on our staff and contractors. And clearly we'll obviously be particularly looking at our performance in the leisure area in the coming days. Paragraphs 8.13 and 8.14 detail the financial impact of COVID-19 on the Council in 22-23. After including the general grant and the sales, fees and charges compensation, expected the Council will have to fund about £1 million from reserves based on current forecasts. And clearly when the government said that they were going to fully support councils, clearly that was 1 million shy of the expectations as the position that this council has to face. Table 6 details the forecast general fund impact. The release of specific reserve funding means that the general fund balance actually does show an overall a small increase, even with the cost pressures that are being funded. But note that reserves, where they're specific or general fund, can only be used once. And that's my very prudent warning to, obviously, to Cabinet colleagues here. I think the performance that, and I think as it's mentioned in the executive summary, I think, and it is important to say here, and I'm sure we will discuss this later, that we have actually worked very closely with Stevenage Leisure. We can see the support we're having to provide them, which is at the low end of the beginning of the year forecast. And I think it actually justifies precisely the decision that we made to want to continue to support for the health and well-being of our community, our leisure services. And I think that's really an important thing that this council and this joint administration has done, and a difficult decision, but I believe a right decision to do that. So I commend this report to colleagues that are asking you to note the report. You approve the changes to as in 2.2, to the 21-22 general fund budget as identified in table 3 and paragraph 8.2. That's a 256 million decrease in net expenditure, and ask the Cabinet to note the changes to the 22-23 General Fund budget as identified in Table 3 in paragraph 8.2, which is a total 68,000 decrease in net expenditure. These will be incorporated in the draft revenue budget for 22-23. So, Chair, I move recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much. And do we have a seconder? Councillor Billing. And would anybody like to comment, discuss, or debate any of the points in that item? No, other than to say clearly central government once again leaving us with a shortfall in terms of delivering the best possible outcomes to our residents is not particularly helpful. Right then, in that case, can we proceed to the vote, please? Oh, yeah, there we go.
Chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And for your final act, Councillor Albert, can you present to me the council tax reduction scheme, year 10?
Thanks, Chair. And this report comes to Cabinet each year for onward recommendation to Council regarding the approval of the Council's council tax reduction scheme for the following financial year. The council tax reduction changed in 2013 with the introduction of localised schemes, and this council scheme is based on the old council tax benefit scheme and is therefore means tested with a standard percentage reduction being made to the final award, and that's currently 25%. As detailed in section 8 of the report, a full review of the scheme had been started at the end of 2019, but had to be postponed due to the pandemic and the impacts of that, both on the team, due to carry out the review, who saw a significant increase in workload administering government COVID grants, and also because of the impact that the pandemic had on our residents, we saw an increase in the number of council tax reduction scheme claimants. Clearly, the pandemic has lasted much longer than we anticipated, and therefore the case remains, and we are proposing the full review is postponed, and it is hoped to take place during 2022. I mean, this is obviously disappointing, colleagues, and we're really very much hoping that we were able to do that, but I just cannot obviously recommend at the moment, in the light of where we are, that this is the right thing to do. Therefore, the recommendation at 2.4 is that no changes are made to the scheme for 22-23, and as such, we carried out a light touch consultation in November. Consultation took place with Herts County Council and the PCC and with the public via our website. No comments on the proposal were received. 7.3 through to 7.6 of the report detail the numbers and categories of claimants and how that has changed over the years. The number of claimants had been declining steadily from around 9,000 in 2013 to just below 7,000 in 2019. But the pandemic has seen this number increase, and although numbers had risen to around 8,000 in early 2021, this now appears to be slowly declining again, with the number of council tax reduction claimants at just over 7,600. However, we may see further fluctuations as the pandemic continues and longer term impacts start to emerge. And clearly, if there are further lockdowns after Christmas, this again obviously could impact on the number of people claiming that benefit. 8.13 and 8.14 detail the funding that we propose to provide to the parish councils again for 22-23, and this amount remains the same as the previous allocation and will be reviewed again as part of the 23-24 medium-term financial strategy and budget process. But we hope that parish councils will find that our proposal there will be welcome to them. So I'm asking Cabinet to support and recommend to Council that the recommendations 2.1 to 2.4 there. We've got Anne Banner with us if you have any sort of particular technical questions around the council tax reduction scheme. But as I say, those are the recommendations in front of you, colleagues, and I was happy to support 2.1 to 2.4, and I move.
Thank you very much. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Jarvis. Does anyone wish to speak on this item? No. Can we move to the vote then, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
I should have said really obviously particularly to thank all our staff involved in the council tax reduction scheme, and I hope Anne's still on the line, and because I think the work that has been done there to actually support our residents in need has been absolutely exemplary. And I think that's something I hope that this cabinet and indeed this council will commend.
Oh, I pushed the priority button instead of the speak. Whoops. I think that that's absolutely something that should be noted, and I might suggest, if possible, could that be included in the report when it goes to full council? Because we can see from chart 1 that there is a sudden increase for some strange unknowable reason in March 2020, and the numbers of claimants have not come down from that point. So, the support that's necessary to help our residents and to support our staff through this period is key and critical. And again, I think this is one of those areas where central government is also letting us down. I have moved on from this item. Is it essential for now? Okay. Okay, quick.
May I try not to talk too much? As someone who is literally in receipt of council tax reduction, being a low-income family and family on disability living, etc. Yes, it took sure it is very, 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 very much appreciated, all the work that's put into this and the work that the officers do. Thank you.
Cool, lovely. Thank you. Okay, and now we shall move on to somebody who is not called Ian to present. Could I please ask Councillor Judy Billing to present item number 13, decommission of local strategic partnership?
Thank you, Chair. It was 20 years ago today, the LSP began to play. It's been going in and out of style, and it's really time for it to come to an end, because 20 years ago, I knew a little tiny bit about community engagement, but I didn't know as much as I do now. And even then, I knew that it wasn't a construct that was massively suited to partnership working in North Hertfordshire. It tried its best, officers tried their best, local organisations tried their best, but it was never actually partnerships with a purpose. And the problems it had in trying to define different models, coming up with hubs and spokes and working groups, was that the same people never got committed to the organisation. So different people came to the different meetings. Very often staff with and representatives without authority came to the meetings of the LSP, and therefore it was impossible for decisions to be made. And generally speaking, although it started with a flourish, it never really, in my view, and other opinions are available, it never really did what it was meant to do. And then, of course, the local enterprise partnerships were set up for much bigger areas, and it really ceased to flourish or do anything at all. I think it's interesting that 2 attempts have been made to consult with members of the local strategic partnership about whether they wish to continue or at least fight for their survival or something. And there have been, I think, no recommendations, no thoughts, no feedback from those organisations, which kind of tells you probably all you need to know. Now, 20 years on from there, I think we have, between us, learned a great deal about partnership working and doing it with a purpose and doing it in groups of people with common interests who want to get specific things done, like the food provision network, like the arts networks, like lots and lots and lots of things that we do as a council in community, through community engagement and lots of other fora as well. So I think it's time to knock this one on the head and say the local strategic partnership for North Herts has ceased to be. It is no more. and move on to the more productive and imaginative and flamboyant and exciting partnerships that we've been creating over the last few years. Thank you, Chair. So please decommission it.
Okay, thank you very much. And the recommendation is that Cabinet support and approve the dissolution of the LSP for the reasons set out in this report and articulated so well by Councillor Billing. Do we have a seconder? Well done, Councillor Jarvis. Excellent. Councillor Albert.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw the paper, I thought, "Oh, is this a good idea? Is this a good idea?" But I think now I've obviously heard Judy's explanation, obviously having read the paper, I think the thing that we can say is that what we've actually, and as Judy has set out, what we've actually developed here is a whole series of new working relationships, things like the food provision network and so on, that, you know, and things looking at, you know, mental health and well-being across the district. And I think these are proving very productive. We've got some brilliant culture and arts relationships and networks going on now, and I think we're actually bringing, where we've helped to sort of facilitate, and they're beginning to develop a life of all of their own. And I think this is very much about, and then I, you know, completely agree with Judy there, is that actually we're developing whole new ways of working, whether it's online, whether it's face to face, and so on, and different kinds of networks that are being amazingly productive, and around the really the diverse nature of North Herts. And I think is clearly the way forward. So very happy to support Judy's recommendations here and support this paper.
Lovely, thank you very much. Now you can notice that the boxes are flashing. I think we've got slightly eager. Are we happy to move to the vote, colleagues? Yes, okay.
Chair, that motion's carried.
Thank you very much. Okay, and now I will hand over to Ian, but it's a different Ian. Councillor Mantle, as Deputy Portfolio Holder for Planning, is going to present the Strategic Planning Matters report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would commend the whole of the report to the Cabinet, but I'm sure you don't want me to go through all the bits of it. I would draw your attention to one or two specific items. One which is of consequence is that Welwyn Hatfield have been told quite firmly by the government there's no question of deferring the adoption of a district local plan. The implication for North Herts is that if and when we ever get the inspector's report, we will have a choice of either adopting it or going out into limbo. There really isn't any other option which will be available. And Welwyn Hatfield are getting themselves into an unholy mess because the inspector doesn't think their plan is sound because it doesn't provide enough housing. And that's the basic and fundamental issue at Welwyn Hatfield. St Albans had a similar problem, and others, and of course that had to restart. The point, though, about our own plan is that we have had absolute silence in the inspector. Promises of delivery of his report in September became October, became November, became December, have now become the new year. We do not know. And when we asked him if he could give any indication when it might be, we got a very dusty answer saying, it's up to me, I'll do it in my own sweet time. What the problems are is still a little bit of a mystery because no major issues have been raised during the 4.5 years of discussions and consultations and hearings and everything else. So enough on the local plan. The other point I would draw to your attention is the Luton airport expansion is sort of going in fits and starts. Luton Borough Council passed an increase in the throughput allowed under the existing planning permission from 18 million to 19 million. And the Secretary of State has now been approached with a serious request that that be called in, which we would very much favour on the grounds that it's not a justified increase. Meanwhile, we're still waiting to find out when they are going to put forward the full increase to 30, whatever it is, 33 million that has been deferred following the pandemic and is now promised for some time in the new year. Those are the things I would particularly like to draw to Cabinet's attention, though clearly I'll take any questions if there's anything else anyone wants to ask about.
Thank you very much, Ian. And I think on the matter of the inspector, we also utilised BIMF Alarmi as one of our local MPs to write to the to write to the department for, gosh, what is it called now? Levelling up community. Lots of letters and nothing to do with local government anymore, sadly, is it? We received a response from Christopher Pincher, MP, which effectively said, the inspector can do what he wants. I can't make him do anything he doesn't want. He's a law unto himself. So North Herts, you're just going to have to continue to wait for him to deal with your local plan, which potentially puts us at risk of various applications from developers that we might not necessarily like to see, and certainly wouldn't want to progress if we had a local plan in place, which is quite frustrating for us all. Does anybody have any questions on the report that Councillor Mantle's presented? Councillor Albert.
Since I'm trying to keep a record of speaking on every item, a couple of one question and one sort of additional point. Just to say, I mean, just to be clear in I think I was really interested in reading through the sustainable, sustainable travel town plans in the back for. Are we looking to sort of do and when would we be looking to do similar things in, say, in Baldock and Hitchin, and how that works through? Or this, you could just probably have missed this somewhere in the in the paper. And it's worth also saying, I think it's not specifically referred to in the report, but obviously some colleagues here had a very kind of good meeting that was chaired by our MP BIMF Alarmi around the with North Herts Council officers, North Herts councillors, Network Rail, and Herts County Council around the station access in Hitchin, and how we can obviously develop that, and how you sort of see and how that would work into a sustainable travel town plan, but also how it might actually work into a neighbouring Letchworth, travel town plan, the people travelling between the two, and that's because that station access, opening up that side, would certainly be very helpful for people living on that side of Hitchin, and indeed, obviously, in not far away in neighbouring Letchworth, in whether particularly if we can sort of develop good sort of cycleways and so on, to the station.
Right. The first thing is the sustainable travel plans are not developed by this council. The Royston one, it's the Royston Town Council. The Letchworth one, it's the Garden City Foundation, Heritage Foundation. So this council has not so far been involved in developing them, and they're being progressed by those two authorities who have actually originated them. So the answer would strictly be, if you can find an organisation in Hitchin to take on this task, we would be absolutely delighted to give them what support and help we can, but we're not really in a position to develop them ourselves, and we haven't done so far. They are now being progressed, by the way, to the next stage by those organisations. I should say, by the way, that the council has successfully recruited a new transport officer 2 weeks ago.
Excellent. I think we were sadly missing Daniel Washington. He was a loss to us. Yeah. Okay. So because Ian is a deputy, he can't propose this report. So I would like to propose the recommendations that the report on strategic planning matters be noted, and that the correspondence and information in appendices A to C be noted and endorsed by Cabinet. And Councillor Billing has seconded off mic. Are we happy to move to the vote, colleagues? Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. That motion is carried.
Thank you. Okay, and returning back to the very able Councillor Ian Mantle to present the Ashwell Neighbourhood Plan.
The people of Ashwell produced a neighbourhood plan which has got very favourable comments from the inspector from the examiner, and it's now got to proceed to a referendum and needs this council to actually cause it to proceed. So could I ask the cabinet to endorse that?
Okay, so I will happily propose this item. Could I have a seconder? Councillor Jarvis and Councillor Albert, I'm assuming, wishes to speak. Oh, well, I saw Steve's hand first. I don't know. I can't do cross-eyed. You've spoken on everything anyway, so Steve can have this one. No, not really. It's an aside. We are a very professional cabinet. Right. The recommendations have been proposed and seconded. Do we have any debate, discussions, concerns, queries? No. Good. Could we move to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. That one's also carried.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And now I have item 16, the Leisure COVID Recovery Update. And I believe I'm turning to somebody who is neither an Ian nor a councillor. Could Louise Randall present the report, please? Or is Steve doing it? I've got Louise on my script, so you can fight it out if you like.
Sorry, yeah, I thought Steve was doing the report, so I'm happy for him to lead on that.
In that case, Councillor Jarvis.
Okay, I'm not wanting to do competitive reporting, but I was expecting to do it. So as the report sets out, we've been pursuing the leisure recovery plan, which the council agreed earlier in the year, and monitoring progress monthly. And the report sets out where we got to in that. And essentially, we've seen a sort of significant increase in the utilisation of the leisure centres, getting back to a position where usage was around about 80% of that in the pre-pandemic times, with some variations. Swimming has recovered much more strongly than everything else, and in fact, particularly in terms of the aqua, the swimming lessons, there are now more users than there were pre-pandemic. And in terms of open air pools, we saw where the level of utilisation is significantly impacted by the weather. But given that we didn't have a great summer, they actually did perhaps better than we might have expected. And there were clearly some people who were happy to swim outdoors rather than indoors, perhaps. So as we've seen in item 11, when we looked at the second quarter monitoring report, the forecast was that the leisure centres were likely to need significantly less support than we originally anticipated. However, I guess this all comes with a big proviso, and this report was written a couple of weeks ago before the impact of Omicron became significant. And I think there are clearly some unknowns to an even greater extent than we expected in terms of what may happen to the usage of the leisure facilities in the new year. Now, usage of facilities varies quite a lot seasonally in normal circumstances, and December is one of the lowest utilisation months normally. And I understand that there is no abnormal drop-off in utilisation so far. However, January is one of the peak months for income because there are lots of people who decide that they've overindulged over Christmas and to take more exercise in the new year, and they sign up for all sorts of fitness activities. So it's not clear at this stage what impact the current status of the pandemic will have upon that, and that may have a significant impact on the amount of income we generate from the leisure facilities going forward. So as set out in the report, we were doing pretty well in terms of recovery, and still are at the moment, but what the new variant and its impact will be is, I'm afraid, impossible to forecast. So I think I would like to propose the recommendation set out in the report that we note the progress across the district.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Albert has got in there quick.
Yeah, happy to second, Chair, and really obviously to highlight, as Councillor Jarvis says, on the important point around, particularly around sort of 8.3, where I mean, I know there's some level of catch up, but the fact of the matter is that that swimming lessons are now exceeding the pre-pandemic levels, and it's worthwhile mentioning that there were some Conservative councillors said in this very room that people could use private gyms and private pools to do swimming lessons. This council decided we value our leisure services, and that's why we made the decisions that we did, and that's why I think 8.3 is particularly important. So commend the report and commend the work of staff working with Stevenage Leisure, and actually in trying to achieve what I think has been up to now a really good recovery and a very good partnership working.
I have a small question, which I'm anticipating you don't have the answer to, so I probably shouldn't ask it, but I'm going to anyway. The Chancellor's announced £1 billion of funding for certain sectors today. I've been trying to work out which sectors and which businesses are going to be supported by that. Do we think it's likely that publicly sort of run or arm's length company run leisure facilities, such as our leisure centres that are operated by Stevenage Leisure Limited, will be able to apply and to access any of this additional funding that's coming through from central government?
I don't know the answer to that question. I could speculate about it, but that wouldn't be useful. I don't know if either Louise Randall or Ian Cooper have any further knowledge about this. Either of them might do.
Can I put an officer on the spot, even if it's just to say, we don't know yet, and when we find out, we'll let you know?
Yeah, I will say exactly that, Chair. I don't know yet. When we know, I'll tell you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Albert.
I mean, it's worth saying, Chair, that we obviously Stevenage Leisure were recipients of business grants in previous rounds as part of the local restrictions grant schemes. That so I think there's a pretty fair chance that as a leisure business that they would be able to be entitled to potentially that £6,000 per site, or up to £6,000 per site. That is, we clearly need to see the detail of the terms of that the Chancellor has announced today, but I think there's a pretty fair chance, I would say, based on previous things and the fact that they were successful in getting grants from through the North Arts Council on previous schemes.
Okie dokie. So we will watch this space and live in hope that central government again can do the right thing. It's not always very good at doing that at the moment, in my view. Right. In that case, we have the recommendation, which is that Cabinet notes the recovery progress of our leisure facilities across the district. I think that's been proposed by Councillor Jarvis, and I think Councillor Albert seconded it. So can we move to the vote, please?
Chair, that motion is carried.
Excellent, lovely. And the final item on the agenda is the date of the next meeting, which does not require Councillor Albert to speak. And that date will be the 25th of January 2022. Whether we are meeting in person or virtually is yet to be determined based on what happens with COVID and what the government allows us to do. Right, colleagues, in that case, if everyone's happy, I'll bring this meeting to a close. Thank you very much.